Hey everyone, welcome back to The Gently Used Human. I'm Dr. Scott Lyons, and today I'm incredibly excited to bring to you a conversation that I've personally been looking forward to for a long time. Our guest today is none other than Michael Galyon, someone whose work in mindfulness and emotional well-being has deeply resonated with me and, frankly, millions of others. Michael has this incredible ability to help us reconnect with our inner calm, even when it feels like it's spinning out of control. In today's episode, Michael and I talk about the real challenges we face, staying present when the world around us feels overwhelming, navigating the emotional roller coaster of life, and finding moments of joy even in the middle of all the noise. Michael shares his thoughts on how to pull ourselves out of the chaos and refocus on what's really important, whether that's during the turmoil of an election season or the everyday pressures that pile up. One of the things I love most about this conversation is that Michael doesn't just talk about mindfulness in theory. He gives us real practical tools to use right now. And I think you'll especially love the mindfulness exercise he leads during the episode. If you're in the middle of a stressful day or just need a moment to pause and reset, this is going to be a powerful practice for you. It's going to be a powerful episode for you too. So whether you're new to mindfulness or just looking for fresh ways to center yourself, Michael's insights in this episode are going to stick with you. Trust me, this is one conversation you don't want to miss. So as Michael says, let's settle in and get to it. Michael, welcome to The Gently Used Human.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you have the voice of an angel. How could I not have you?
Thank you.
To all those gently used humans out there who just need a little touch of the voice of the angel, you are here.
And happy to be here.
Thank you. So I want to talk about everything mindfulness and calming, and also how do we navigate this world that is so challenging, so full of hurt, so full of joy, and just be present in it, because damn, it's fucking hard to be present sometimes.
It is incredibly hard, and there's so much going on.
There's so much going on.
Especially, as I'm not sure where this is going to air, but during this election cycle all of this stuff going on and everything in the world, there's a lot of chaos.
Yeah.
I think we lose sight of the fact that there's also a whole lot of good.
Yeah.
So much good. And, really my mission is just to get people to understand that even amidst the chaos, there is good. There is joy to be found. There is happiness to be had. And we get to experience it all.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest complications or challenges of the chaos is that it inherently pulls us out of ourselves and towards it. I mean, that from a neurological perspective, that we are designed that way to be pulled towards the stimulus, pulled towards the chaos, and which makes it hard to even, as you're talking about, recognize the good or recognize the calm or recognize what is available within us.
Yeah.
How do we even begin to pull away from that chaos? Besides listening to your voice. I'm just going to keep talking about your voice.
Just listen to the voice. Go to the podcast. I think, that is part of it, to find what regulates you, to find what really brings you back to center, because the chaotic moments they become addictive in a way. And it's that pull to, there's an intense emotional reaction that happens and we get excited about that and we want to figure things out.
Yeah.
And so mindfulness is really about creating an awareness of the present moment in all of its facets and figuring out, how can I become aware of the sensations that are occurring around me? How can I become aware of the situation that's there, aware of my instinct to action in that moment, and then figure out, how do I make the smartest, most conscious choice that's going to align with who I want to be in the world, where I want to be in the world, and do that. And so even though those things tend to be pulling us so heavily, being able to notice that and say, you know what, that might not be in my best interest to go into that fight. It might not be in my best interest to have that conversation right now.
Yeah.
And then finding those ways to regulate, come back to center. And from there, then you get to make the right decision for yourself.
Going to that idea of having this idea of where you are or your values of who, is that something you always knew? Or did you have to do a lot of work to discover it, like the rest of us gently used humans?
I think it took a lot of time and a lot of time to figure out that authenticity of what is it that I actually want, not what do my parents want, not what does society want from me. I spent a lot of my life trying to be what other people wanted me to be, and to kind of be that perfect doll for people to play with, in a way of how do I create comfort for you? How to create a safe space for you, which has created this wonderful career for me.
Yeah.
But it also distracted me a lot from what it was that I wanted. And so that was a big process. And I think mindfulness helped a lot with that, of being able to come back and just say, what is it that I actually want? What are the things that bring me joy? What are the things that get me excited to get up in the morning? And how can I create more of that in my life?
And if someone who's listening is going, well, it's about other people. It's about, my partner or my friends and making sure they're happy. Is that the same?
It's similar to in acting. We say yes and.
Yes and.
It's yes and. Yes, yeah. We take care of other people, and that is that contribution that we give to the world, but we're also part of that world. So one of my favorite meditations is the loving kindness meditation, which is really taking us through all of these subsets of people who are in our lives, and recognizing that we can easily give to the people who we love dearly. And it's so easy for us to give that love and kindness to. And we can give that to a stranger. We can give that to someone we've had conflict with. We can give that to the world around us, and recognizing that that includes us as well. And so it really does have to be that give and take. You can't just continually deplete yourself to the point where there's nothing left for you to give and expect for you to be able to give that to anyone else.
I think there's actually so many of us that are in that battle of, if I can just give more, if I can prove myself more, if I can love them enough, then I'll get what I need. And I remember when I was studying physiology in school, and I learned that the heart has to give itself oxygen first before sending it off to the rest of the body. And it was such a beautiful metaphor, and more than metaphor, but that we have to really fill ourselves first before offering the overflow to the rest.
And it seems so cliche to say.
So fucking cliche.
We've all heard it a million times. And that's one of the things I like to do, is kind of take those cliches and realize that there is truth to them. And how do we make that practical? How do we actually do that? And that's a lot of what I talk about in the book, is what are these practical applications of these things that seem, we've heard it a million times. We've heard to take a deep breath. We've heard how to take care of ourselves first. We've, as RuPaul says, how are you going to love someone else if you can't love yourself first? But what does that actually mean? And how do we do that? And so that's a lot of the work that I do, is trying to figure out, how do we just synthesize that into digestible bites that people can understand and implement? I have a little controversy over that line from RuPaul. I read about it in the book. I hate it. I think it's not true. Why do you have controversy with it?
Well, I mean, no disrespect to RuPaul, bless, but that's not our developmental progression of love. We don't come into this world feeling and knowing love for ourselves. It's not even if there's not safety first in our environment, then we're certainly not going to have the privilege to feel or experience love from someone else or ourselves, because we're too much in a survival stance. And so, I think about it as I also agree with it to some degree. For those of us who know how to love and give and give and give, but not actually to ourselves, it's not sustainable, as you said. And until we nourish ourselves, we can't actually nourish fully a relationship or relationships with other people. But if we've never had the taste of love from someone else, or been able to receive or absorb any of it, we don't have that modeling for ourselves either. Self-love is not often modeled to us by our parents, by anyone in society, but shame certainly is. And so we pick up on that. And so that's the first thing that we're going to do. But there does tend to be those moments, those glimpses when we experience love, and we know what that feels like. I always go back to, my grandmother was this just loving force of, I could do no wrong. There was, there was on her, when she was in hospice, she was very, very sick at the end. And I remember going into her room, and first thing that she did was she grabbed the hospice nurse and she was like,
this is my grandson. He is the most amazing and just like singing my praises to that point.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting at that point in my life. I was really dealing with a lot of shame, a lot of self-hatred, and I never saw that. And so to hear that from her, I was able to really feel what it felt like to be loved.
Wow.
And I remember there was a meditation that I was doing where the meditation teacher was having us do a loving kindness meditation. And we referenced someone who loved us. And we started to try and emulate that and put it inward.
Mm-hmm.
And so I created the self-love guided visualization, which it was the most viral video I've ever done, and put it out there. And I think it has like 20, 30 million views at this point.
Wow.
And just has really resonated with people.
Yeah.
And in that, what you do is you start to imagine within the room, you imagine the door, and you start to see that person who you deeply love, who has cared about you. And you see them walk in and they sit in front of you and they start to look into your eyes and they say, "You are good." And just start to speak those words that we need to hear. And then what you do is you turn that inward and you change the verbiage to say, "I am good." And in that moment, you start to feel what it feels like to give self-love to yourself. And you start to allow for that to become your inner monologue. That voice that we have in our head that tells us we're not good enough, that, all those terrible things, that was picked up from somewhere.
Yeah.
We absorbed that from someone else's voice, from society, from all of these things. And somehow we've convinced ourselves that that's our voice.
Yeah.
So why can't we do that with love? Why can't we take that voice of the person who loved us the most and just replay that in our mind until it becomes our voice and we start to hear it?
We're so good at internalizing the shit and the rage and the other people's pain, and not as good. It's not as easy to internalize that love.
No. And I don't know if it's because we feel protected when we can kind of prepare for the things that other people could say, or if, it's that if we're mean to ourselves first, we can be prepared for when other people are mean to us.
Yeah.
But it's also, and that's where I guess I would agree with RuPaul. If we can start to, have that feeling of we can prepare ourselves for what it feels to be loved, we can then accept love.
Yeah. I think that's a better phrase.
Yeah.
If we can prepare ourselves for love, then we can give ourselves that. Yeah. And receive it and offer it. How long in your journey, how long did it take you? I like asking that question because I feel like it normalizes for a lot of us the process of it just happened overnight, right?
Yes. It's certainly not overnight. No. My life has been really an interesting kind of journey of trying to figure out what was right for me and what worked for me, and a lot of errors and a lot of failure. I originally started out doing musical theater.
Yeah.
That was kind of what brought me to New York City. And in a way, it was great for me because it allowed for me to have a voice. Yeah. It allowed for me to put myself out there. What I recognized and realized was it wasn't my voice. I was allowing for myself to feel this praise and feel this kind of success by pretending to be someone else. And so a lot of the work that I did was trying to figure out, once I left performing, what is my voice? What is this actually? And then I started teaching in a preschool and first taught gymnastics. And then there was a preschool attached to that early childhood space that I was working in. And so ended up moving into being a preschool teacher. And that taught me a whole lot about myself. Taught me a lot about, what it meant to figure out how to teach these little minds and how to understand from a space where they've never experienced any of this. Everything is brand new. And how do you create, all of these really big concepts and make them so digestible for these little minds?
Yeah.
And that's really what stuck with me and how I learned, because I was having to go through that process of figuring out, how do I make things so simple that a 3-year-old could understand it? And that's what I needed. And so a lot of this was the work that I was dealing with my own anxiety, with my own depression, that I was dealing with my own stuff. How do I figure out and read all of these books and listen to all these podcasts and then figure out, how do I make that digestible for myself? And it was, it's been a lifelong process, but it was really like a good 15 years of just figuring it out before I felt comfortable sharing it with anyone.
Yeah. Do you feel like that level maybe the level of anxiety or the level of depression has diminished, but does it still show up even in practice?
And that's, I always tell my clients, they're like, how do I be like you?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, we can teach you that, but know that it's the acceptance of the fact that there are going to be moments when anxiety just kicks your butt that day.
Yeah.
There's going to be moments when you don't want to get out of bed and that depression is just really there.
Yeah.
I think the greatest thing that I've found is the avoidance of resistance. When I'm resisting the anxiety, when I'm resisting the depression, it ends up staying with me for longer. And when I can just allow for it to be there and say, okay, this is just going to be an anxious moment. This is going to be an anxious moment right now, and I'm going to feel into that. Or this is when depression is just going to be there in this moment. I'm going to feel into it. I'm going to learn from it. And then I'm going to let it pass. And that's really what I think the key to it is just by not leaning into the resistance.
And when you say let it pass, I mean, it sounds like a simple process, which we know is actually quite difficult to let something move through. What is your personal process or practice in letting it pass? Or how do we break that down?
So it's figuring out, how do we experience it? Tara Brach talks about the rain meditation, which I think is a beautiful way to kind of approach this, where first you recognize what's going on with you. You start to allow for yourself to, so many of our feelings we just can't really even understand. And so we just sit there and we're like, I don't know what I'm feeling. So really recognizing and being able to name and label what's going on. So I'm feeling incredibly anxious today, or there's a deep sadness today. And then the A in that acronym is for allow, and allowing for it to just be there, to manifest in whatever way that it needs to. And so how do I feel it in my body? What are the thoughts that are running through my mind? Are there other emotions that are associated with it? And that's where you move into the investigate part of it. And you really start to look at, okay, where might this be coming from? Is there any situations in life that might be causing this or triggering this? Is there anything that this might be trying to teach me in this moment? Is this something that is trying to hold me back from something? And once you have that ability to really have that investigation of the emotion, then you can start to sit with yourself. And the N is nurture. So you start to give that self-care and that self-acceptance and that gentleness towards yourself to be with the emotion without judgment, to be with the emotion without needing to make it go away. And then you start to feel, okay, so if this is how it's feeling in my body, is there anything I can shift or change to make that feel a little bit better? We're talking 10%. We're not talking about great, but 10% better. What would that feel like? Maybe I need to do some movement. Maybe I need to run. Maybe I need to punch a pillow, whatever it is. And then figuring out, okay, what are the thoughts that are present right now? Do those thoughts serve me in this moment? Or are they just ruminations at this point? Am I ruminating about the past? Am I, future tripping at this point? Do those serve me? And if they don't, bring it back to that present moment. It's what's happening right here in this moment. And then eventually you start to just regulate and come back to the space where that emotion is not the all-encompassing feeling that it was before. And that's really how you start to let it go and let it pass.
Do you feel like that allowing stage is kind of that holding that we wish we would have had maybe as kids, but we're doing it for ourselves and the emotion that's here?
So much of it is just being that person that you needed. And growing into that ability to, and I don't know why we don't allow for ourselves to do more of that.
It's a great question.
If we can write a book. That could be the second book.
I mean, I think some of it is like, we're still fucking wanting that other person to do it. We want that person to come in. I still want that. Like, fuck, I'm feeling really anxious. And I'm like, why can't someone just call me and hold me? And then I go, oh yeah, no, I have to do that. And there's a little anger about it. Of like, oof. But then it's really about, the reality is like, there wasn't that capacity. There wasn't that availability of the people we needed when we most needed it. And it's not going to change just because we want it. Which,
and it gets especially difficult when you do become the person who is doing that for others. And you're doing that. And so it's not, why won't people do this for me? It's, why don't you do this for yourself?
Do you want to know the hardest thing my therapist ever told me? She said, "Oh, it sounds like you were loving them in the way that you wanted to be loved." Oof. And it was just such a fracture of like, no, I'm such a loving person. Why wasn't it reciprocated?
Yeah.
And it's so difficult when it's like, if you're trying to give them all that you actually want, there's not a lot of space for them to find what you need and to give it to you.
Yeah. Or to be able to understand what they need.
Yeah, or to understand what they need or communicate it.
That's a powerful, when you can start to give that to yourself, you get the language to be able to say, this is how I need to be loved, or would desire to be loved. Yeah. And they get to do the same with you.
Yeah. It's hard.
Life is hard.
Life is hard. Life is hard. How do we get through it? I want to talk about calm. Seems to be a kind of part of your brand.
Yeah. Calm, kind, connected.
Calm, kind, connected. And I want to deconstruct. I love deconstructing language. And so like, what do you mean by calm?
It really is a settling.
Okay.
Let it settle is the key phrase that I've used. It's my signature phrase that I use in every meditation, use on social media, and it's just let it all settle. And I learned this in a preschool classroom.
Really?
And it was this really, really exciting moment where I was dealing with this little boy named Jack, who was 3 years old, and he was dealing with separation for the very first time. And it was leaving his parent. It's that safety net.
Yeah.
He had never known a world where his mother wasn't present for him. And all of a sudden being in this overwhelming classroom where there's lights and colors and other kids crying and screaming, it's chaos.
Yeah.
And so, of course, the minute that he recognized that she was gone, it was this panic.
Yeah.
Ultimate panic. And you can see it. It's, the body is tense. All the physical manifestations of stress and anxiety are there. And he's, labored breathing, and you could just see his mind racing to try and find safety and find her. And so over the next few months, we worked with his mom and we worked with him to figure out how can we create safety in the space and get him to be in a regulated state when he's in the classroom. And I started to pull from this was a time when I was doing my own mindfulness journey and figuring out how do I deal with my own panic.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we did was the 5 senses grounding technique, which is so simple and so, as everything that is worth doing is.
Yeah.
And it's just allowing for you to look around the room and come back to the present moment through observing 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. So I felt the benefits of that in my own life. And so I started bringing that in and started working with him. Yeah. And while he would still have that initial panic, going through that with him and being able to identify, what's the color of the rug? What's, what do we see outside the window? What do we hear? What do we smell? Can we taste our favorite snack? You would just watch his entire body start to come back to this calm space. So his body would start to settle. You could see those thoughts that were spiraling just weren't there anymore.
Yeah.
You could see just the emotions start to settle. And all of a sudden this calm would just rush over him. And from that calm, he was actually able to look around and start to see, oh, this is actually really exciting. This is all my favorite stuff right here in the room, which he just wasn't able to see.
Yeah.
And so that's really where I just started to say, let's let it all settle became just this signature of, that's what it means to find calm, is to find that space where you're able to be present to the moment.
That's beautiful. I used to study Aikido, and there's the entire practice, even though it's a martial arts practice, is to yield into what is. So if someone's grabbing your wrist and throwing you across the room, or they're coming at you, is to like truly settle into what's here and ride through it. It's funny, because there are different ways we can find that settling. Yeah. Sometimes it is through the senses, or sometimes it is through our breath. Yeah. Sometimes it's through a lot of activity.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, sometimes, it's that runner's high of being able to, I've never experienced that, I will say. I've run many marathons, and I've never experienced that. I'm miserable the whole time. So, but people do say that that's a thing.
I haven't either, if it helps you. And because that's, I think, another of the controversies that I am interested in is about this idea of calm. It's like, do we have to be totally settled or still, I guess is a better word, to meet calmness.
And I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think it's more of, it's an awareness of the present moment, and you get to decide from there.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of what I talk about the book, is just all the things that we want in life.
Yeah.
Even our experience of love, our experience of connection with other people really has to come from a calm, regulated space. And you get to decide what you do from there.
Yeah.
But it's just being at the place where there is a bit of control.
Yeah.
Because there's a control in the surrender.
We talk about that because I feel like often we might think of like, if I'm surrendering, I'm giving up control. I'm giving up myself, or I'm giving up the attachment to something.
In the book, I talk about coming home to yourself.
Yeah.
And it's really creating that space where it's where you feel the most comfortable, where you feel the most aligned with yourself. You feel the ability to be in connection with the things that matter to you. And it's a feeling, it's a memory that you can return to. It's like when you come home, it's that like, this feels right. This feels good. And you're going to leave home from time to time. We're going to venture out. We go about our day, but we always know it's there. We have the key to it. We can come back whenever we want to. And so there's that space of home where you actually begin to be able to control how you respond to situations. You're in a space where you're not being blindly reactive to emotional triggers. You're able to come back to that centered space where you can feel those triggers and have the control to be able to say, that doesn't serve me.
Think about some of the opposites of not being home. I mean, maybe anxiety is a great example, or this idea of like reaching out past ourselves or closing ourselves off. We might think we're at home, but actually we're imprisoned within that home.
Yeah.
And would you describe, because I know you've been on your journey, like, was there a definitive moment where you're like, I'm home, and this is what the taste of it is, or this is the way I could help someone else recognize it by my own experience?
I don't think it was a specific moment.
Okay.
I think there were moments along the way.
Yeah.
One of the moments that I realized was the self-judgment starting to slip away. When I was growing up, I was much larger, existed in a much larger body. I was about 100 pounds heavier than I am now. And when I lost that weight, there was so much fear of going back to that or feeling that. And so every time I would walk past a mirror, it would just be this feeling of like judgment of what it looked like and what it, how I was appearing in that moment. And I do remember this moment of just being able to walk past and without judgment, just from a place of neutrality, look into the mirror and just recognize that was me and be okay with that. There were moments when I would be presenting ideas, and instead of having those filled with judgment and fear of how I was being perceived, that feeling of, I get to relay my view of life, and I get to relay my opinion without having to fear it. And these just eventual little milestones came. So it wasn't just one moment, but it was these series of moments that just allowed for me to say, oh, this is what it feels like. This is a taste of what it feels like. This is a room in that house.
I love that. I love that idea that we're getting to know each space until we more occupy it full time, which, I mean, it's one of those things, and this is, I mean, in mindfulness or somatics or any kind of reflective work, where it's like, we can talk about it, but it's abstract until you experience it.
Yeah.
And it's like, but to make it enticing enough for someone to want to go on that journey, because it's often painful.
It's a lot of what I've done on social media is, how do I create in the quickest of moments, because you don't have a lot of, a lot of time to get your point across, the experience that I'm trying to teach on. There's so many social media accounts that are just yelling at you, telling you what you need to do, or, poking that pain point and then getting you to like listen. Yeah. And I really just wanted it to be a space where you could come and you just start to feel. You start to feel in a moment of what it feels like to find that calm, centered space. Yeah. It's that opportunity and invitation for you to join in on it. And I think that's what we need more of, is just the ability to experience things instead of being told what to do.
Thank you for that. I want to take a moment to give a loud shout out to the Embody Lab, which is one of the most incredible resources for body-based and somatic therapies. This show is all about healing, and the Embody Lab does exactly that. Whether you're on your own journey of transformation and discovery, or enhancing your skill sets in your career as like a coach or a therapist, a body worker, or really any career where you are supporting other gently used humans, the Embody Lab is your place for deep, inspiring, and impactful workshops, certificates, masterclasses, and an incredible community of like-minded folks. I love the Embody Lab, and so do so many other people that call it a platform to come home to over and over again. The Embody Lab is giving my listeners an exclusive offer, a one-time 10% off code to enhance your embodied well-being. All you have to do is go to theembodylab.com and use the code GentlyUse10 at checkout. I mean, one of the questions I had for you today even was like, okay, there's a fair amount of mindfulness teachers online. It's kind of a scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have stood out amongst them and really grown in not only popularity, but of interest and helped a lot of people. And so I'm curious what you see as that dividing line, or what's kind of elevated you or what you're offering. Because there might be similar tools, but there's something also unique and different.
I think where social media has transitioned is people are smart, and people are aware when they're being sold.
Yeah.
When someone is trying to do something for something, it's that, buy this for me, buy that for me. And, it really was when I started social media, a lot of it was just, I was in the middle of the pandemic, had lost my job, and was just needing to hear the things that I was telling other people. And it really came from this organic space of, what do I need to hear in this moment to feel that comfort and safety, and sharing that with people. And I think people were really attracted to that. I also made it a mission to really have it be a service-based platform where I wasn't trying to sell you something.
Yeah.
The business has succeeded because people are interested, because they feel connected to it.
Yeah.
But it's not because I'm, for $9.99, you can buy my, And even now with the book coming out and with the, I just released a course, it's hard to pitch those things.
Yeah.
And I don't do it often.
Yeah.
Because that's just not how I want to operate. And I'm also a firm believer that, what you put out comes back to you. Mm-hmm. And people will find things. People will find your book without you screaming at them to buy it.
Hopefully.
And
the rat race of books. Yes. Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
How's it been feeling since your book came out? I mean, you've been putting out work for so many years now, and then there's something different about actually like a book.
It felt right.
Yeah.
It was scary. The process of writing the book was a lesson in itself. Yeah. And it actually was, I almost gave up and almost quit because there was so much going on. I had a huge blow up in social media almost overnight.
Yeah.
I think I gained half a million followers in 3 weeks, which is intense. It's a lot to take on. And with that,
especially
as an introvert, someone who's very shy, it was, being recognized on the street, very strange situation. But I had also signed with my network that I do the podcast, and was contracted for 90 episodes a year of the podcast. Plus I was, doing the social media, client base blew up, and then I'm writing this book.
Yeah.
And they wanted to fast track it. They wanted it to be done in 6 months. And so it was a moment where I had to say, okay, what is really important to me right now?
Yeah.
And I wanted it to be done with integrity.
Yeah.
And I wanted it to be done in a way that was going to actually make an impact. And that required time.
Yeah.
And so I called them up and I said, I'm willing to walk away from this right now.
Good for you.
I'm willing to walk away from this right now because it can't be done in the time frame that you want it to be done in.
Yeah.
And fully understand that. And luckily they were amazing and gave me, 9 extra months, and we worked together very closely, but it was definitely it was a tough one.
Yeah.
Tough. But now it feels good. Now that we have it out in the world.
When I signed my book deal, they gave me 3 months. And I failed miserably.
Yeah, it's just not.
I wrote something like 400 or 500 pages, and it was absolute shit. And
when it's bad writing. You're just like, this is not.
And it's mortifying.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it really does take time to really, even if you have so much content out there in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a very different format than, and so much of what I do is how do I get you to understand this in 15 seconds or a minute? And then taking that and trying to elongate it into, but it was good. I'm excited for the next one. I feel like I learned a lot.
What do you think you'll do differently?
My next one will be a children's book.
Oh.
So that's exciting. So that's actually more I can take, those small little moments and put them on the page, but I'm excited for that.
How is that to come full circle back to?
It's so cool. I mean, it's everything in my life has, when I was experiencing it, it felt so weird. It was like, why am I now as like the shyest, most introverted kid now pursuing a degree in musical theater? Why am I doing that? And then why am I now leaving that to teach preschool? And then after that, I went into the corporate world and worked on international franchising.
As one does.
But it was, looking back, every single thing makes complete sense. And it all filters into the work and filters into everything that I'm doing. But yeah, I'm excited to be back in a preschool classroom. That's the vision that I have of reading the book.
That's
and
so
just,
sweet.
Getting to, for the first time, read my own words to them.
Yeah. That's so sweet. Jack was the kid you said?
Yeah.
I love that, like, coming full circle back to Jack.
Jack is now like 20 years old.
Oh my gosh. Are you like in touch with him?
No, I haven't seen him, but he must now. He's probably like 17.
Time passes.
It does.
Time passes. For those who are listening, I want to kind of bring it back to some practical tools, which you offer, again, so easily and accessibly. Is like, I'm curious for you, is it like, there are tools for each category, like I'm anxious, or I'm sad, or I'm angry, or do you feel like there's some fundamental tools we all need first?
Both.
Okay.
Yes, and.
Yeah.
Yes, and. So
agreeable, Michael.
I try. There are definitely tools that are going to be applicable in any moment. Okay. I think some of the grounding techniques that I put into the book, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 calming technique for anxiety is a big one. Any of the somatic tools that I talk about, I think the butterfly hug is one of my favorite ones. It's good for kids and for adults.
Can you talk us through some of those?
Yeah. So it's simply taking your hands and you place them on your chest like you would.
We're doing it,
like you're a little butterfly.
So your thumbs are crossed.
Thumbs are crossed.
Palms are facing
Palms are facing your chest. And it's just tapping from side to side. And so it's that bilateral stimulation that's creating that calming sense. And it's that comfort and nurture that just comes through this. So this is a great one. Anytime that you're feeling any intense emotion, just bring it back to this. Again, it's just regulating so that you're coming back. And I'm sure you can tell us why that is happening.
But no, I mean, there's something about deconstructing the why that sometimes gets in the way of the experience.
That's a big part of it. It's just sometimes people don't care.
No.
Does it work? It's the efficacy of it that is really, and that's when I was writing the book. There was this part of me that felt like I need to be like Professor Galyon to be able to tell you every, and sound really smart about it. I realized that's not what people want or need.
No.
It's there are millions of people who can tell you all of the scientific reasoning for everything. And there are people who are there to tell you how it makes you feel and do it in a way that just allows for you to feel it and embody it.
And sometimes, those who are listening, if you need the information first, like why does tapping work, or why does a butterfly hug work, and that creates a certain level of safety to dive in. Great, do it. And also notice if like you're needing the details to come up cognitively in order to avoid coming down into your body, into the sensation and the experience.
And there's room for both.
Absolutely.
And need for both.
So agreeable.
I try.
Do you have like on your, like, just on your wall at home, like both and? It's like just the poster both and.
I should. I'll make that. Put that on my desk.
For those who are listening, both and is a shift from what's considered like dualistic language or philosophy, where it's like it's this or that. Mm-hmm. Those create entrapments, like, or what we call binds. In the business, we call it binds. Yes. Yeah. Where, like, if you put your hands together, your fingers, and you try to pull your fingers apart from each other, that's a bind. It's where it's like, I loved him and he was mean to me, or I loved him but he was mean to me, mm-hmm. and it's the way in which we get trapped in ourselves. Yeah. But a both and suggests this non-dual approach that says all can exist here. Yep.
And that's a big part of experience emotions. Yeah. Is we can experience, we think the pursuit of happiness is, if we're not happy, or if we don't have a full experience of happiness in that moment, that it doesn't exist. And it can. We can be in deep, deep sorrow and sadness and grief and loss and still have moments of joy. Mm-hmm. They can both exist.
How? Asking for a friend.
It's, metaphor I like to use. It's like we have a little garden and we have, there's different seeds that exist, mm-hmm. and they're planted in the ground, mm-hmm. and we get to choose which ones we're going to water that day, and which ones we're going to, the sun is going to shine on. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they're going to grow and those, seeds of sorrow are going to be really, really big at that moment, but it doesn't mean that the joy doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that you can't go over there and water it and experience it. Mm-hmm. It's not going to feel how we would want it to feel to that degree, because the sorrow is going to be pulling our attention. Yeah. But it is important to be able to look at those things and to figure out what are the things that have historically brought me joy. Yeah. And how can I start to replicate those? And even though they may not feel the way that I would want them to feel, the benefit is still there.
Yeah. That's so important, and such an integral part of like any even trauma work of going. People might assume, okay, we got to go into it where the vortex is pulling me in. And there's such an important resource of saying, what else is there here? Yeah. Like in all, like one of the, I assume it's the same in mindfulness-based work around pain, mm-hmm. where we say, meet the pain, but also what else is here besides it?
Yeah. It's looking in, and that's where, when we talk about the rain meditation, it's the investigate part is, what else is there? Yeah. It's, yes, we feel that sadness. That sadness is absolutely there. Yeah. But what else is there?
Yeah. How does someone find what else is there if their attention is so pulled in? I mean, this is, goodness, the challenge of our generation is like, we're so pulled out. I mean, technology is designed, marketing is designed to pull us consistently out from ourselves or from what we were thinking, from what we were doing, to focus. It's an attentional war. Yeah. And unfortunately, most of the time we are not winning. Yeah. So how do we reclaim that and be able to do this very, not so simple, but imperative tool of also noticing what else is here?
I say that with awareness comes choice. Mm. And a big part of this is just being able to find that choice of, do I want to follow that? Do I not want to follow that? And so even just cultivating that awareness of when we're being pulled towards something that is calling out for attention, and then being able to have that choice of, is this what I want to be doing? Mm. Is this what best serves me? Does this align me with who I want to be in the world? Yeah. And if it does, go for it. Yeah. If it doesn't, that's when you get to start to investigate and look at the other things. And okay, if this is making me feel a very certain way, and this situation continues to bring me there, what are some ways that I can move in the opposite direction? Mm. One of I think really good advice, I don't even know if it was given to me or just came to me, but it's, if you don't know where you want to go, mm-hmm. let it be one step away from where you don't want to be.
What does that look like for you?
So it's figuring out, okay, if I'm in that moment where it's all encompassing of this is not a good feeling, or this feels bad, or I'm stuck in one emotion, what is one step away from that feel like? What is the action that I can take there? Yeah. It's not, let me get to the complete opposite of it. Mm. It's just, what would it feel like to be a little tiny step away from here.
Yeah. Do you think that's hard for people to envision, of like, again, when they're engrossed or enwrapped in that place of like, what does even a little bit less look like or feel like?
Yeah. People get sucked into this is life and this is forever.
Yeah.
And it's the concept of impermanence. It's, everything comes and everything goes.
Yeah.
And this is temporary. It may be temporary for a long time and it may not feel great, but it does pass.
Yeah.
And when we can stop trying to hold on so tightly to everything, it's the same thing with, we create a life where we feel like we need to be in a constant state of happiness. We start to manipulate life and situations to only bring us that. And we miss out on everything else.
The happiness wars.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I appreciate you saying that, because I think it's so easy for people to kind of chase happiness and assume that even like mindfulness, calmness, if I can achieve calmness, I'll just be happy. But I what I appreciate so much about you and your work is that it's not about chasing happy.
Yeah.
It's about being able to just be here with what is. And as you're saying, have more choice around it.
And know that it's okay to create a life where you're putting things in place that are going to lead towards happiness.
Yeah.
But if that's not the situation, if that's not the experience at that moment, it's okay. It's, again, the resistance. When you're resisting all of the negative or bad things in life so hard, you're just prolonging it. You're just sitting with it more. You're drawing more attention to it. So it's just being aware of where you are.
Yeah. And there's a tension there of like, I need to bring some awareness to what's happening, why it happened, but also be able to not give it attention.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a good example is like after a breakup, it's a wild opportunity to learn and to grow and to develop more awareness of yourself and what you need and how to communicate or how to feel the way you want to feel in relation to someone else or in relation to yourself.
Yeah.
And it's so preoccupying.
Yeah.
And such an entrapment as well, or potential entrapment.
Yeah. And it's looking at what went wrong. How do I prevent that from ever happening again? Because I didn't like that feeling. And I never want that to happen again. But you miss out on the totality of the situation, of the fact that there were things that were probably really beautiful about that. There were things that you learned. There are things that you want more of.
Yeah.
And so it's really looking at just a holistic view of all of this, of not only what can I put in place to prevent me and protect me, but also how can I open myself up to what was good?
That ability to zoom out. I love that practice of like, the mindfulness practice of starting to like look at your hand and then look at your hand in relation to your arm and then your hand arm in relation to your shoulder and then to your torso and then to your head. I mean, you could do it in a mirror or just feel it, but you start to like grow the ability to zoom out to the whole of you.
Yeah. Because
so easily we might go, ooh, I got bit by that mosquito on my finger and that's all I see.
Yeah, we get really stuck.
We do get stuck. We do get stuck. What's a practice that you are really feeling drawn to, like in today? Like you have such an arsenal. I don't know if that's the best word. Arsenal is kind of a strange word in relationship to mindfulness tools, but
And in the book, I call it my calm kit.
Yeah.
And it's really that building, because there are, you can have a million different tips and tools and tricks and tactics, and some days they're not going to work.
No.
There are times when a deep breath is going to radically change your day, and there's times when it's just going to make you feel more tense. Yeah. And so that doesn't mean that you just give up and say, okay, well, I'm just going to be tense for the rest of my life. It's what else can I try? Yeah. What else can I move to? Yeah, today I have been a little distracted today and just kind of finding my way of like, was feeling under the weather for like 2 weeks and just kind of like, I think, it's been a lot going on. Yeah. And so I think my mind has been really on just this overwhelm and feeling of like, woe is me. I'm so sad. And so I think it's a practice of gratitude has been really important for me recently, of just setting myself up to be able to say, okay, I acknowledge everything that's going on. And I am tired and I have been sick, and that's okay. But also, what are the things that I can lean into? What are the things that are powerful and meaningful? And just that practice of looking for the good in life. So I've needed to do a bit of that this week.
Has it been helping?
Yeah, it has.
I love that. And I keep wanting to talk about like tension points with you, maybe because you're so easygoing.
Yeah.
But it's when I hear you talk about those moments of like gratitude, I feel you turning into them. It's palpable and doesn't feel like an override or a bypassing.
Yeah.
And I think that like gratitude practices, even mindfulness practices, have gotten a lot of pushback lately about this process of overriding, bypassing what's actually here to just like put on top of.
Yeah.
And like, it's like, the garden has a lot of sorrow seeds that have sprouted.
Yeah.
And you're just, the idea of like, just throw some gratitude on it, cover it up with gratitude.
Yeah.
Put enough manure of gratitude on it that it will just, eventually all the minerals of that will nourish the soil of sorrow and all will be fine.
And it's not that at all. It's understanding that they both exist in that same space.
Yeah.
And that there's room, and there are times where your attention needs to be fully on that sorrow.
Yeah.
And there is a process. I would never suggest bypassing anything, because I'm all about feeling into it and allowing for yourself to be there.
Yeah.
But it's while you're feeling into it, let's also recognize that there is good. And it's different than, growing up. It was that famous phrase of the 90s where like, there are children starving in whatever country it was at that point.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I'm here and I'm experiencing this in this moment. And so it's not that. It's not just saying like, well, you have it better than them.
Yeah.
It's saying, this is a really hard experience right now. And I also have things that I can be grateful for.
Yeah.
So just experience those both at the same time.
Yeah. I forgot about that super shameful period of time of just like not meeting what's here in the kids, but actually just trying to make them have some perspective, in air quotes, of course.
Yeah. Really. And there's a whole lot that goes into it.
Yeah.
Classist.
Yeah. And perspective doesn't often work as a technique. I mean, it's different from awareness.
Yeah.
And when we talk about zooming out, there is a version of that gives you totality, a viewpoint, but I wouldn't call it like the shameful kind of tactic of perspective of like, if I can get you to see in a different way, then you'll find me, you'll see me, you'll stop complaining, you'll stop doing this and that, as opposed to if I can meet you and get curious with you, then actually, yes, the perspective might shift and expand, but not because we're forcing it, because the fundamental need of being seen, felt, heard, understood allows for it to be.
Yeah. Greatest thing you could ever do for anyone is just to sit with them and acknowledge what they're going through, validate their emotional experience, and allow for them to begin to see possibilities beyond it.
Yeah. Yes. And the tension caveat is when it's directed in a way that's violent. And I don't mean just like physically violent. I mean like, we would talk about like nonviolent communication, that there is also a certain responsibility for us to also be in some ability to communicate, or to say, whoa, that's not coming out the way that probably allows for me to be heard and seen, because it's coming at you as opposed to from me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's I just want to give that caveat.
Totally. Yeah.
But yeah, it is fundamentally, I think it was in The Body Keeps the Score that Bessel talked about a part of the brain that activates when we're validated. And I used to call this the validation reflex. I didn't know that there was I assumed there was a neuroscience correlation, but I didn't know it. And that there's a way in which when that part of our brain lights up, when we're being felt and understood and seen and heard, validated, that there's a reflexive response of our body's tension releasing. Like there's a softening, a yielding that just organically occurs as part of that process.
Yeah. I see that
All the time. Right?
Yeah. And it's, similar to with Jack. It's just that feeling, that settling.
Yeah.
That's what it's that calm.
It's that calm. Yeah. I like pairing all of that together and going, oh yeah, that's the release of being seen, like calm. I know that we have to start to wrap up, and I'm sad about that. Can you guide us through something that just feels right in this moment to you? And I want to go, actually, before we do that, I just want to name that I really appreciate you honoring that just because we learn a tool in this moment doesn't mean it's going to work. Doesn't mean you as the person trying it is a failure. Mm-hmm. It means, and it doesn't mean that the tool itself isn't valuable. But in this moment, we're trying to find what works best for us in this given moment with who we are and what we're going through.
Yeah.
So I really just wanted to acknowledge and say thank you for naming that.
It's a big part of it.
Yeah. Oftentimes we can shame ourselves in mindfulness.
Yeah, totally. And it's the same as when people are like, I'm really bad at meditating.
Oh, yeah.
I'm really bad at meditating. My mind doesn't shut off. It won't stop thinking. And I'm like, oh, it's not going to.
No.
It's not going to. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's, it's that awareness of thought and making that conscious choice to just redirect. And if meditation isn't working for you, let's find something else.
Yeah. Pillow fights.
Yeah. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it does. Yeah. I mean, I think coming back to the present moment, always a good thing. And just having that awareness of the body is a great thing.
Yeah.
So let's do a body scan.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So we can go ahead and close down your eyes and then just start to become aware of first the breath. Just simply noticing what it feels like to breathe in and what it feels like to breathe out. And we're just going to move through a few different points where that breath can touch us. First, noticing that inhale and exhale through the nose, and with everything finding that space of curiosity. What's the temperature of the air as it comes in? And how does that temperature differ as you breathe out? And then start to drop that awareness now into your chest, feeling the rising and falling of the chest with each breath. Just breathing in and breathing out. Noticing with each breath how the chest can rise and fall. And then drop that awareness now into the belly. Feeling that deep diaphragmatic breath as you breathe in, feeling the expansion of the belly. And then coming back to center with the exhale. Feeling that deep inhale, expanding the belly outward. And then coming back. And as you feel the breath, start to become aware of the edges of the body. Noticing the space around you. Noticing the space to each side of you. That openness of space in front and behind you. Above and below. And in connection with the breath, allow for the body to begin to expand into that openness of space. As you breathe in, let the body stretch out, those edges pressing into each direction of space around you. And then coming back. In this moment, giving yourself permission to take up more space, and then come back. As you feel into this moment, just start to connect to the heart, and start to just ask yourself one question. What do I need today? Whatever that means to you, just let yourself become aware of what it is that you need. Let that stay with you. Challenge yourself to be able to meet that need today. And when it feels right and safe to do so, go ahead and flutter your eyes open, take in the space around you, and enter back, connected and calm.
Thank you, Michael.
Of course.
It's beautiful as always.
Thank you.
And for all those who are listening, I hope you were not driving during that.
Oh yes, please put a warning. My podcast network made me put many warnings.
Really?
Yes, because people were falling asleep, and it does happen.
It does, with your voice.
Yes. So if you've made it through this whole podcast, congratulations.
I love that. You have this incredible calming voice. I always had this hypnotic voice, which is actually quite different.
Yeah.
But it is quite soothing. And so that in itself is such a beautiful gift to the world.
Thank you.
Yeah. Michael, where can people find more of you? Everyone needs to go buy the book, Let It Settle. It's on audio. I mean, like,
there's an audio book,
I just want to say,
which I did record.
And it is in itself a meditation, even when you're not doing the practices.
Yeah. And that's the good thing about the audiobook. There's 9 meditations in the book. They're written meditations for you to read. You get to experience them in real time on the audiobook. So both are good to have.
Yeah. I love that. So where can people connect with you?
Yeah. So website is a good place to kind of find everything. Mm-hmm. So michaelgalyon.com. And that's where you can find links to the podcast, Letting It Settle with Michael Galyon. Mm-hmm. You can find links to be able to purchase the book, the courses. But main place you can find me every day is social media. So michael.galyon on Instagram, or Coach Michael1 on TikTok, or anywhere else you find your social media needs.
Thanks. Don't forget to find him on LinkedIn.
I'm very active on LinkedIn.
Very, very active on LinkedIn. Michael, thank you so much for being on the show. And to all of our gently used humans out there, we love you. Thank you for listening to the Gently Used Human podcast with Dr. Scott Lyons and friends. Visit gentlyused.com for fun extras. And don't forget to spill the tea and gossip about the show with all your friends and frenemies. And show some love by giving us 5 stars and leaving a review in your favorite apps. This helps us connect with all the other gently used humans out there. Oh, and by the way, you look fierce today.